Today, SolarWakeup Live, Yann Brandt is my guest. He's the CEO of SolarWakeup, and they have a new buying group, which I'm excited to talk about. Welcome to the Solar Podcast, Yann Brandt.
Tim, it's great to be here.
Really appreciate you coming on the show. This is a long-time fantasy of mine, I have to admit. You're an aspirational peer of mine in the podcasting world with the SolarWakeup podcast, so thank you for doing all of that, creating all of that wonderful media. Your daily newsletter is extremely popular and well-known among solar professionals and other energy professionals. If anybody listening or viewing hasn't been there, go to SolarWakeupLive.com and you will see what I'm talking about. And today we're going to get into your newest offering, which is the buying group. But before we do that, I wanted to talk a little bit more generally about what's going on in solar and the choices that you make. You are a highly influential person in our industry, which has played out in our favor and for humanity's favor, I will say. Recently, Wood Mackenzie published an article that was derating residential solar, saying that residential solar was going to falter due to the economic crisis that we're in right now in the U.S. And you pushed back on that. What's that story, Yann?
Well, I mean, first of all, thanks for having me on, Tim. You know, it's great to be here, and it's always fun to talk solar. I mean, part of my job at SolarWakeup is to read the news, and over the last 9 years that I've been writing the newsletter, I've kind of come to be the one that says it how I see it that given day, and things change, right? So I do recognize that the market is dynamic and things change. I've certainly adjusted my positions both over the long term and short term when someone gives me a different viewpoint of what's going on. This wasn't really, it got covered over the last few weeks, but since COVID hit. Well, let's kind of backtrack. 2020 was always going to be a banner year for the residential solar industry and the solar industry at large. It was going to grow. We're at the 26% ITC before the step down on 22%. But it was, SolarWakeup was calling for 25% growth coming into 2020. And even that forecast for me, I always felt very secure in that, because of the data points that we were seeing and hearing from installers. COVID happened. Obviously, the first indication of COVID from my perspective was we were going to go to zero, that sales would drop to no new backlog for solar installers, residential installers, because how are you going to sell something or install anything when you couldn't get out of your house? And, so we started tracking this on a weekly basis and then monthly basis. And Wood Mackenzie, which does the solar market insight, which is backwards looking, but also has a forecast, rightfully dropped their 2020 forecast down from about 2.9 gigawatts down to 2.1, which was about 25% drop from 2019. And I thought that was a bit harsh, but I understood where that was coming from. I wrote on the newsletter at the time that I thought we would exceed that number. And in June, July, we started seeing the data points, right? Loan Pal did a securitization in June saying that they would hit their all-time high in June in new loan origination. And this was a reoccurring theme. We were hearing May was our best month ever. June was our best month after May. July was the best month after that. I didn't understand how companies were able to hit all-time highs month over month, and then the market still drops on an annual basis. That being aside, it wasn't a big factor. What bothered me was a keyword, and I wrote about this last week on the newsletters. Wood Mackenzie put out a blog post about their coverage of the residential finance market, and they said it would falter, right? Falter is a drastic word. They didn't say decline, meet headwinds, reach barriers. They said falter. And that word kind of bothered me. And like many things, I kind of just went to my LinkedIn. I wrote a post. and PV Magazine decided to write a whole story about it. And I didn't mean for it to be much more. They called me and I had a chat. I explained myself what the data was that, gave me indication that falter was the wrong way of framing it. And I'm glad, Wood Mackenzie responded within a few days. And I think that's great. I think that's how these discussions should take place. And not only did they say that residential finance is a strong asset class, but they also defended some of their positions, which I'm glad they clarified. More importantly, they adjusted their 2020 forecast up to 2.8 gigawatts, essentially flat with 2019. And I think that's a great takeaway, and it's a signal of how resilient our industry is.
Of course, COVID has impacted our industry. There's no buts about it, but because we are such a fast growing industry, and that ding that COVID has brought is instead of, continuing on the rocket ship, we're just staying steady as she goes. So that's really good news. And thank you for pushing back on Wood Mackenzie. We do love Wood Mackenzie. They are a wonderful research organization and publishing organization. I was just looking at their website, and they have a new report out called the Energy Transition Outlook 2020. So there's just tons of really good info there on power and renewables. So we're grateful for all of that. So anything else in the news, Yann, that you want to talk about before we get to SolarWakeup's buying group?
Look, to that point, the interesting thing that we're learning in COVID, right? Not just the resilience of the solar industry, but we're also learning that what happened in Q2 wasn't a standstill. The benefits, or not the benefits, but solar installation companies have been building up this massive backlog. You're going to see it when the public companies announce Q3. You'll see Q3 exceeding Q4 of 2019 because it's basically 2 quarters put back into one. The number one problem that you're getting out of installers, if you ask them what's your number one barrier, business hurdle right now, they're all saying labor, right? We're back to labor being the restricting growth factor here, and I think that's a big point. The other, obviously, it would be negligent on our end to not talk about what's going on in the country right now, right? Like, you've got the 6 of the worst fires in California's history burning all at the same time currently. The air quality in Portland, San Francisco, LA are some of the worst in the world because of the fires. We're getting back to talking about the need for distributed generation resources, this demand response. We just had these heat waves that caused energy crisis. Not only are we in a great market economically, we're also an incredibly important market, both for, maintaining our quality of life in this new norm of hotter, harsher weather. But also from a standpoint of, we need the resilience locally and the impacts that we're going to have on climate change. There's going to be a massive hurricane hitting New Orleans this week. Hurricane Sally, which, I live in South Florida. It was Tropical Depression 19 when it hit us, and it was one of the wettest storms that I've ever been in as my 25 years living in South Florida. And it reminds me a little bit of what most don't know is Hurricane Katrina hit South Florida before it hit New Orleans. It was a little bit stronger than Sally was this time, but it gave us we knew how bad it was going to be for New Orleans because we went through it. Louisiana is going to have a rough week, and we should make sure that we cover that in the news. But again, we're going to talk about solar, we're going to talk about batteries, and we're going to talk about the need for distributed resources, because the number one thing that happens in these storms is power line infrastructure goes away. So, I'm thinking about them, and I'm thinking about, it's just an incredibly wet storm. We got over almost 10 inches of rain, and the Key West got over a foot, and you could see pictures of Duval Street completely underwater. So we're in an important industry doing important work, but it plays a role in a greater part of the market.
Yes, the The climate chaos is upon us, Jan, and these increasingly frequent major storms like this Hurricane Sally, which is going to dump an estimated 30 inches of rain on the Gulf Coast. I cannot imagine being anywhere with 30 inches of rain. That is just mind-boggling. And that's the kind of rain that puts buildings underwater.
Let me I'll give you an anecdote, because so I have a flat roof on my house in South Florida. For every inch of rain that hits my roof, there's 2,000 gallons of water that comes off the roof onto the land around it. And you should see, like, I have the, downspouts, the amount of water that gushes. So imagine that, right? So one house, 30 inches would mean 60,000 gallons of water just pounding. And that no earth can, no landscaping, no drainage system can take that on all at the same time. So it's going to be rough.
Very much so. Well, thanks for bringing that up. And the California fires, of course, our hearts go out to all of our colleagues in California and all of the residents of California. I lived there for 10 years. You yourself were a recent resident of California. And I love California. It's a wonderful place. It's a fifth largest economy in the world. We need California healthy. And so many good innovations come out of California, like the solar industry, pretty much. So we got to keep that train rolling.
For sure.
Well, let's talk about SolarWakeup. I'm going to share my screen here. And this is your landing page, SolarWakeup.com. You are well known for creating this news service. Every day you send out a newsletter to subscribers, and you just have to go right there and subscribe, and you'll get in your inbox the daily roundup of what's going on in the solar industry. And it is, bar none, the most rigorous and thoughtful daily newsletter on the solar industry. So thank you for doing that. And I don't know if you want to tell our viewers, how did you ever dream of doing this anyway?
There's kind of two parts to that story. So it's actually last week was my 9-year, August 29th, 2011 was my first edition. And two things led to it. When I first got into the solar industry, there was a Sunday night newsletter called Solar Buzz, which kind of highlighted, these are the press releases of the week in solar. It wasn't commentary or anything of that nature, but I remember every Sunday night going to bed with this I'm missing out feeling, because companies like SunEdison were signing these huge 2 megawatt, 5 megawatt PPAs, and my job was to sell 25 kilowatt systems, and I felt so far behind every Sunday night. And it was just like this hopeless feeling of I'll never catch up. And so I remember that newsletter, I don't know what ended up happening to it, always kind of stayed in the back of my mind. Floridians know another newsletter, which isn't solar related. It's called the Safety Review, and it covers political news in Florida. It's a former communications director of Jeb Bush. On his 10th anniversary, he wrote a story in the newsletter that talked about why he started it, and that in 2001, he just felt like there was a better way to clip news services in a news office. And I came home, and this is something my wife will never live down. I said, you know what, someone should do this for the solar industry. And she looked at me and said, well, you should do it. And so now 9 years later, every night I'm sitting on my laptop clipping the news, and what's evolved on it is people have commented over the years. They're like, Yann, you should write what you think about the news, not just write what happened, but give us your opinion. We would value that. And that kind of just took off. And the way I view it is, I don't try to tell you what to think. I mean, there's definitely parts where I give a strong opinion, but I want, running a business or, being an executive or whatever role you play in the solar industry can sometimes be somewhat lonely, right? And especially when you read articles, I said, well, maybe there's a way for people to read an article, have their opinion, but also think, have one other opinion. And you don't have to agree with me, and people don't, sometimes disagree with me. And that's the most common response I get back. The way that the newsletter goes out, all people have to do is hit reply and the email comes right back to me. There's no filtering system. So if you strenuously agree or disagree with something I said, people aren't shy about telling me how they feel. I've had some pretty robust arguments about it, and sometimes I see a different viewpoint. It's a large market, and I try to cover both utility scale, C&I, Resi. I've played in all the roles in my professional life, and but certainly sometimes people feel left out one way or another, and I try to advance the ball on the solar industry. But I definitely root for it. I'm not a impartial observer. Being a journalist on the solar industry, I'm definitely a cheerleader for the sector as a whole.
I was lucky that my dad was interested in renewable energy. That's how I learned about it as a kid. He's a writer and a historian, but also a technologist, self-taught programmer, very robust programmer. So anyway, I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We were doing backyard solar thermal. PV was at the annual energy fair at University of New Mexico, but only, they had solar panels that were a foot square. Solar panels were very expensive. They were like $300 a watt. And now we're sub 50 cents a watt. John and I were just talking he was buying panels for 32 cents this morning a watt. And it's amazing to see that cost adoption curve since the 70s. When did you get interested in renewables and then get, into the industry full time?
Yeah, no, it's a funny story. So when people ask me how I got into the solar industry, I joke. I don't know if it's a joke, but my commencement speaker from college was Al Gore, and his speech was all about climate change. This is when his first documentary, Inconvenient Truth, came out. And here's college senior graduating, hot spring day in Baltimore, and Al Gore is giving some speech about Shoney's and climate change. And maybe that kind of stuck with me. I grew up in Germany, so I always had a kind of green sustainability aspect to it. I remember recycling 5 different cans when I was a kid, and so that was always in the back of my mind. But I moved back to Florida after college, 05, and there was a bunch of hurricanes, and I just graduated with an engineering degree. A friend of mine, his dad owned one of the largest roofing companies in the state, who asked me, can I help him out on engineering fronts? So I went to work for a roofing contractor designing roofs to withstand hurricanes, which in and of itself has no relation to solar, except that one of the architects from a school district asked the question, hey, we've got some money for pilot projects for solar. Do you have any solar that can withstand hurricanes? Right? And like any kid that's asked a question they don't have the answer to, you say, yes, I know something, and then you go and Google it. And so my foray was January of 06 or something along those lines. When I got put in touch, I Googled sticky solar, and that went into hurricane resistant solar, peel and stick solar. And I ended up on the phone with a salesperson from Unisolar, which some people are gonna, grunt and kind of like shudder at the fact of thinking about Unisolar. But that's how I got into the industry. We became one of the largest installers of thin film in the world, doing projects all over Europe, all over America, and never looked back. Since about 07 is when I got into solar full time.
Refresh my memory. Was Unisolar a thin film product? Or?
Yeah, it was it was a triple junction amorphous silicon. Energy Conversion Devices was the parent company, which really was this incredible R&D company. It was publicly traded. It was called ECD, and Stan Oshimsky and his wife were the founders. And they had solid state hydrogen with solid state hydrogen pumping stations for transportation. But the commercial product was this amorphous silicon It worked great in low light, so it actually worked really well in a flat installation. And the funniest part about it is, we could have gone crystalline or we could have gone thin film. Was kind of the way we viewed it. But racking was so complicated in '07 that we decided we didn't have the expertise on how to design racking systems. We're roofers, and therefore we know how to attach something on roofs, and we went the thin film route.
Yep. So since you mentioned hurricane-proof solar, what is the status, and you're an expert in racking, what is the status of hurricane-proof rooftop solar in the world today?
Well, from a technology standpoint, we've been here a long time, right? The Florida market was just never big enough for engineering teams to really pay mind to the local product and building code requirements, namely the Florida product approval and the Miami-Dade notice of acceptance, kind of the preeminent global certifications for high wind resistance. And so, as you mentioned, I used to run a company called Quickmount, which leads in residential racking. And it was, obviously I was from Florida. I knew how to do the local building certification. So we actually were the first to have Florida product approval for mounts, which is sort of the first step to it. We're actually at the point now where Generac has a Miami-Dade notice of acceptance for their system, and others have. Snap and Rack has followed with a Florida product approval for their system. So we're already there. It's an engineering standard. It's not a product certification. But the solar industry is also catching up, and with the authority, the AHJs, you have to get the right solar panels for Florida as well now. Your uplift rating for the panel has to meet the code, whatever height and whatever standard you're installing towards. Miami-Dade and the Florida Keys have 180 mile an hour wind load requirement for your load, your design pressure calculations. So we're there. We're meeting Florida building code the same way that the window industry or the roofing industry has before us.
I was talking to Nicolaou of PanelClaw, whose interview is going to publish this Thursday. And he said that they had 20,000 panels installed in Puerto Rico. And during the last hurricane event there, they didn't lose a single panel from their installations. So that was impressive. 180 mile an hour wind loads. We have 115 mile an hour wind loads here in Illinois, and we think that's a lot, but wow.
Yeah, but you got the snow load to go with it, so you have to do up and down, which is the down is sometimes more complicated than the wind zones. And
yeah.
I'm glad you brought up Costa. There are a few people that do it as well as Costa and PanelClaw. They've been at it for so long, and they're finally hitting an incredible stride. It's great to see what they're doing with Claw FR. I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with that business going forward. They're going to be one of the preeminent platforms, as the baseline for getting solar. The first headline today is no more naked roofs, which is something I've always kind of taught my kids. They when they draw a building, I always teach them to draw a solar panel on it, which they now view as normal. But
right.
PanelClaw is going to be the foundation for making sure that there's good solar on every roof.
Absolutely. And the other, my other commentary on PanelClaw is that they're releasing a product called Claw OS. So this is relevant to your comments about AHJs. They're really trying to create a robust and highly functional database of different requirements around the country in different jurisdictions to make permitting and engineering one click, basically. Absolutely. And so if they're successful, they're going to launch that. I mean, they've been using it internally for several years, and now they're going to launch it for the public this winter. So we can look forward to that.
Fantastic.
So let's talk about the Wake Up Live buying group. And I'm going to go there. I was curious to know, you and I talked in the pre-show a little bit about this, but give us the lowdown. What is the buying group? How does it work? Who is it for?
Yeah, you know, this came out of spending 2 years in the residential solar industry, running a racking group. And one of the interesting things is the price disparities in the residential solar installer community, not because of volumes or because of some other factor. It's purely because there's a lack of transparency in the marketplace, right? Two installers in the same state could be paying a price range of 30 to 40% on the same exact product. And so the buyers group has two distinct aspects to it. One is price transparency. So we have, it's a membership-based organization. So I align the buyers group with the installers, meaning that they know that the buyers group is always trying to get better pricing so that installers are bringing margin back on their side of the pocket. The rate sheet is going to be private only for members, but at a $99 a month price point, if you use the buyers group for one project, we guarantee that you're going to save more money than the $99 a month, right? So even if you're doing it on one house, the savings are big enough where you're going to be able to do it. The other part of it is, you can leverage the price transparency to make sure that you're getting good prices, because what the buyers group doesn't do, kind of peel back the onion. The buyers group has no other embedded costs in the products other than you buying it, right? It doesn't have shipping included. It doesn't have credit terms. It doesn't have site delivery. Some of the things that you get from value added partners like distributors. The buyers group basically tells you this is what the product costs when you don't have any of the extras. Kind of like the airline analogy. You go to an airline, this is the price you pay if you don't want a suitcase, you want to go on last, and you sit in the middle seat. You're still getting from point A to point B. And every company's situation is different. But, we now have really good, really wide range of products. One of the best things that happened since we launched is most manufacturers have reached out to us, and within their same channels of going to market, whether they're exclusive to distribution or not, right? We work within the best path to market that results in the lowest price possible for the installers. We don't cover it up. We're working on behalf of the buying group. The more people that join, the better the pricing gets, right? So we're over 100 megawatts of purchasing now, getting close to 200 megawatts. And likely by the end of this year, we'll be over a gigawatt. And over the next few weeks, we'll actually be announcing some great new partners once everything is signed, which we're really excited about.
So I'm somebody who learns by doing. So walk me through, if I'm a member of the group, you're targeting solar installers, right?
Yeah.
Front and center. And today I'm buying equipment from distributors or a distributor. Usually you have a preferred vendor.
Yeah.
And you have that relationship, what those prices are, what that product suite is. And there's always small points of friction. You can't get quite the right product or the right price, but they make up for it with wonderful service or customer care or whatever, right? And it keeps you coming back, or listening to your feedback on getting access to other better products.
Yeah.
But so how does an installer benefit by using the group directly?
Well, I mean, let's be realistic, right? The number one reason that installers use distribution is fundamentally a bank, right? They loan you, they extend credit terms for you to be able to float the project, get things installed, get paid by the customer, and then pay them back, right? That's 90% of the value proposition. But if you then look at what you're paying versus what you can pay, right, through the buyers group, you end up realizing that your cost of capital, it can be tremendous, right? And and more importantly than that, what you don't know is you do know your price, but you don't know what your competitor down the street is paying, right? And therein lies, I think, the biggest issue, the biggest friction point for installers is they don't want a win-lose arrangement with their distributor, but they want to know that everyone is kind of on the same level playing field, and they want to know that they're getting a good deal. And I've seen the other side of it. It's not always the case, right? It's not out of the norm for an installer to be paying 30% higher price on some product than what they can pay. Not that they should pay, but that they can pay through either the same source or another source. And, I like residential installer companies to own and operate are hard enough. That's a challenging market. You're dealing in a really vast environment of direct to consumer marketing. You're, getting used to new financing products. You've got lease partners, you've got loan partners, you've got 4 different types of loan products. The one thing that should be simple is knowing the price of the products you want to put on someone's house and knowing that the price you're getting is fair. So what we've done is it took us a while to get this put together, because what we want to do is have really robust channels of products, not just good prices, but also the fact that members are going to be able to acquire them and get them on time and at the price that we promised them. And so that's our product list is relatively small, but it'll grow, as soon as we're comfortable with the supply chain. But the one thing that's for sure is if you're one of 90% of the residential installer community, you're going to get better pricing on most of the products on the price list in the buyers group than you would. And it's simply from the standpoint that you're buying on, in a group that is going to be much larger than an individual company by itself. So there's kind of there's power in masses here.
So if I'm a buyer, I'm placing an order for so many kW or so many megawatts, right? And then how does that order get fulfilled?
Well, every product doesn't necessarily have the same place where it's coming from. And so the way that we do it is the members have an online portal. They submit their purchase order for everything that they want. And the one thing that's, the buyers, it would be really clever of us to put really low prices for modules, for example, and then turn around and be like, well, this is for containers, right? So you have to buy a container. That's not the case. All of our pricing that's listed might look like container pricing. It's actually better than container pricing for many installers, but it's for pallets, right? So we have a really low threshold in order to order, and we don't require you to order at all, nor require you to order 100% of your product. It's if you just want to use it to negotiate better pricing or to buy down your cost factor, that's fine as well. But you upload a purchase order for everything that you want, and then each source, and let's say everything on your purchase order doesn't come from the same source, you're going to get back an invoice from each individual source. And because we don't touch product, we're not a distributor, we also don't touch the money. You're paying, we're working on your behalf to tell you this is the best channel for you to get this price. We have that price guaranteed by that source. You get an invoice back, you make the payment, and the product ships, right? So it's kind of if Costco was a consignment store, and you just went into the club to get really cheap toilet paper. We're the Costco here. We make money on the membership.
Got it. I'm a big fan of the Costco model. I recently bought some lithium-ion batteries for my RV on Costco, and it was an amazing price. It was a product that I had already bought one of, called Lion Energy, and then I got 2 more at like 30% less.
Yeah.
So wonderful discount.
Once you're in Costco, there's the promise of the volume, right? Which they don't guarantee, and quite frankly, they don't guarantee that they keep your inventory either. So it's, we're one step removed from this. I'm going around the country sourcing the lowest cost products, or the lowest cost for the products you need most. And that's the goal, right? And what this is doing is creating a little bit of equilibrium between where the margins are floating, not reducing the margins, but where the margins are floating from the moment the products are made in the factory to when they land on the installers in the installer's warehouse. I want the installer to be the most profitable part of that chain.
I noticed that SolarEdge and Enphase together totally dominate the residential solar market. SolarEdge has over 50% of the market now, I think. But is there a clash of titans there at all, or tell me a little bit about those choices?
Well, I mean, look, SolarEdge and Enphase definitely have leadership positions. Different groups are going to say different market share numbers. Enphase definitely thinks that their numbers are higher than what analyst reports are. But I think both of those companies are doing very well. I mean, just the untold story of the solar industry is there's been a tremendous amount of wealth creation at the employee level at both of those companies. A lot of this is public through Form 4s, but VPs, et cetera, that have stuck it out at both of those companies have done incredibly well for themselves, creating not just wealth, but generational wealth to some degree. And that's fantastic to see. And I don't think we're anywhere near the top of that. SMA still doing, quite well, right? That's still kind of the preferred string for those that aren't fans of SolarEdge for one reason or another. But now you've got Generac coming in, going up. They're kind of coming at it from a couple of different angles. Optimizer-based string solution, right? But really not talking very much about their inverters. Really focused on having this microgrid solution for the home at SPI, I guess, which is right now. It's a generator battery, DC coupled battery, smart transfer switch, and inverter and optimizer for a home, which is really appealing for some markets. If there's a couple of things that happen to it. I don't see this as a huge market driver, but your solar production in Northern California isn't that great right now with all the smoke in the air, which is going to put give a little bit extra flavor to people that want to have a generator, which isn't a great idea from a fossil fuel perspective, but Generac is going to do quite well there. And that's a company that entered the clean energy space through the Pika and Nurio acquisitions just recently. Their revenues on clean energy are nothing to write about, but from a public company perspective, I think they're going to do quite well. But the market's big enough to have three plus players. Interestingly, and this was missed by most in the news, Outback, the forgotten off-grid solution, inverter solution, just did a deal with Kohler generators, which is kind of funny that neither SolarEdge or Enphase thought about doing a deal with the number 2 player in the generator market. So we'll see how that plays out. I don't know if Outback's deal with Kohler is exclusive, but I found that mildly entertaining and interesting.
Yeah, the term battery inverter is not common parlance yet in certainly in commercial solar. Maybe it's getting there in residential, but that is going to be the mainstream, of course, in just a period of a few years now. SMA is well known in this space with battery inverters. I think Australia was perhaps the earliest adopter, and the Sunny Island line, right, of products. And then you mentioned Generac, which is a well-known generator company, and now they've acquired a battery company called Pika. Where were they? New Hampshire or somewhere up there in the Northeast, right?
Yeah.
And so now they're going after the residential solar and storage market, which is great to see because they really are a trusted brand. We'll see Maybe it's too early to have much customer feedback. And then you mentioned Outback, which is I mean, they're really well known for the off-grid solar market, right?
Yeah.
I have very little experience with Outback.
Yeah, no, they were the original. I mean, they've been around a long time, but when you want to do off-grid, that's who you used. And, you know, that has been, I'm sure they still have some core technology of it, enough so that Kohler was willing to do the deal with them, as opposed to, you know, going, you know, leveraging that and saying, oh, this is interesting. Generac's getting into space. Who can we partner with? You know, I would have expected Kohler to turn around and do something with SolarEdge, perhaps, but maybe SolarEdge and Enphase executives are saying, you know what, let's just build our solution to meet a Generac inverter generator and convince the solar industry that the best way to partner with a generator solution is to not use Generac's clean energy line, but to just use the generator and then move along. The reason for that is that every single person that walks into a Home Depot or Lowe's, the first thing they see, even before the shopping carts, is a Generac generator. It's in the lobby of every single Home Depot and Lowe's, at least where I am here in Florida. So I'd be that's probably, if I was the marketing guy at Enphase or SolarEdge, that's what I would be doing. I would be building a flyer with a big Generac generator and say, my clean energy solution is the best way to do a microgrid in a box with the household generator name, and kind of undercut them on the clean energy side. But
yep.
You know, free advice for them.
And then I wanted to touch on what I think is a really great innovation that SolarEdge is going after, and that's DC charging for electric vehicles. So when you can skip inverting the DC power coming off of the array and put that power into your EV, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
A little bit bleeding edge, but that is kind of in the DNA of SolarEdge. They're a very tech-forward company. It's really, I'm always curious to see where they're going. We're doing a lot of SolarEdge in the commercial space. Over 2/3 of our installations now are SolarEdge, I have to say.
So, yeah, they will become. You know, you've now seen even small utility scale installing with SolarEdge, especially where you have you know, high trees and some shading on the edge cases. They have their 4-to-1 optimizer solution, which, you know, Enphase is making a little run at them. They have the Duo coming out, which is a 2-to-1, and then AP Systems has a 4-to-1 system, which is, you know, four modules for a microinverter. So there's some interest. I think we're still really early on in the space, and it's maturing. It looked like it was going to be a duopoly between SolarEdge and Enphase for a little bit, but right now it's just everyone's winning, and the market's going to get bigger and bigger, which I think is key.
Indeed. Well, unless there's anything else you want to tell us about the buying group, I think we will wrap this up. I want to remind our viewers that they can find all of our content at cesnrg.com/podcast. I'm Tim Montague, your host. We really appreciate everybody viewing our content. Please check us out on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, and as I say, hit that bell for the energy transition. Thank you, Yann Brandt, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and hope to see you back here someday soon.
It was great to be here, Tim. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Yann. Take care.